for council already.
Okay, and that was on the DBA's, the report that I sent out to the town table. Okay, so we did find the notice of motion.
Okay, I'd like to call this regular meeting, council, for Monday, April the 9th to order. The first item would be the adoption of the agenda, and having said that, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda. We're going to add a late item under section 12A and regarding the change in the power outage time work to be done. So, may I have a mover for that amendment? Councillor Ross, Councillor Hammond, all those in favor? Are there any other?
I have two late items for notice of motions,
Okay.
for motions. One is in support of motion 167, which is going to the federal government on rural crime and the policing issue.
Okay, so we'll label that 12B.
Yeah.
We vote on this separately.
Yeah, we'll do them separately.
Yeah, I'll
second
All
that.
those in favor, second,
Yeah.
second, all those in
Yeah.
favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. And?
And the second motion is on behalf of the Downtown Business Association, which is concerned about the excessive speeds and safety in the downtown core. And as we talked about in our discussion with the roundtable, about putting in four-way stops and reducing the speed.
So speed limits.
Yeah.
You have a seconder? Councillor Tripp?
Just a quick question, was that a notice of motion or are these both motions?
The notice of motion went out already in the report that I sent out to all council from the roundtable discussion.
Okay, but it hasn't, we haven't put forward a notice of motion in
Yeah.
the regular meeting yet.
So there was no, that's
No.
what I said, there was no notice of motion put forward on that one.
No, so what do I do, read the motions tonight?
Yeah.
Yeah, put it as a notice of motion this evening, and then we'll
Okay,
address it on the 23rd.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, we'll do that.
But the first one, there was a notice of motion for that one too, or there was none?
That went through in an email yesterday, and it was in response to one that we all got emailed from,
Okay, but there was no physical notice of motion made at any meeting?
no,
Okay, so
making
they
them
can't, no,
now.
we can't do those then.
Oh, we can't do them now?
You can do the
make a
notice,
notice.
you can do the notice,
Yeah.
but not a,
Okay,
okay,
so I can make the notices tonight.
okay.
Okay.
Councillor Tripp?
Thank you. Yeah, regarding the motion 167 that Councillor Hammond is talking about, what they're asking for is really just a letter or an email of support, and they actually have the wording, they've given us the wording right in within that email, so does that actually need a notice of motion, or?
We're just support, we're sending a
To
letter
bring
of
it back to our
support.
table, yes, it does.
Okay, yeah.
We're just endorsing somebody else's motion. Well, there's procedures that you have to follow. You get upset with other people that don't follow procedures.
It's just correspondence. We're not making the motion.
Okay, so.
You're giving notice of motion.
you're
No,
gonna-
because the motion's already made.
It's a letter of support.
It's a letter of support.
We can debate it when we get to it.
All right.
All right. So may I have a mover for the amended agenda for this evening's meeting as presented? Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Hammond. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right. Moving on to 3A, the adopt the minutes for special to go in camera from March 26th. Resolution is the council adopts the March 26, 2018 special meeting minutes as presented. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson, seconder. Councillor Tripp. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. 3B, recommendation, council adopts the March 26, 2018 regular meeting minutes as presented. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hammond. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. No registered petition, no unfinished business. Moving on to 6A, written reports of council. Recommendation, all written reports of council submitted to the April 9, 2018 regular meeting be received. Mover, please. Councillor Ross, Councillor Hammond. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Moving on to the verbal report from the RDK representative, which would be myself. Not too much, except for the BCDC meeting, which I attended on April the 3rd, which encompassed basically some discussion on some of the mills. There was the Midway Mill is closing, And due to the 2017 fires, it also affects foreman layoffs, about 20 employees, and also Western Forest Products. Another discussion was held in regards to BC Transit Service. There is an interest in, Community Futures showing an interest in participating in partnering for funding options. BC Transit does carry 62% of the funding costs, so Lisa Trottier, the interim regional manager, is going to hold a meeting with some of the directors from regional to discuss some options for Grand Forks, Midway, etc., and mostly Greenwood. So that's where we're at on that one. And that's basically it on that meeting. So, Councillor Thompson?
Oh. The Midway Mill is closing?
Fog and fiber, closing down for good.
Does that have anything to do with the tariffs, or?
No, it's basically based on the shortage of logs. Shortage of logs
That must have been a very sudden decision, because I spoke to Daniel Monson 2 weeks ago.
just came up. I was surprised myself. Everybody was happy. It's being affected.
Wow.
It affects all of the mills, foremans. I don't know how it affects it locally here, but definitely.
Well, that's gonna hurt the west boundary.
Mhm.
It's gonna hurt the whole boundary.
I don't know if it's full-time or short interim closing, but it will. Councillor Tripp?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Conner. Would you be able to elaborate just a little bit on the BC Transit issue there? And I heard you say options possibly for funding?
Yeah, it's, they're looking at partnering, but that's gonna be dependent if the interim regional manager is willing to accept that. Or different options, like I mentioned about private enterprise, but that's gonna be a real tough one because BC Transit might not be in favor of partnering under their rules. So there was discussion about rate increases in the fares. So I have limited amount of information until that May 2nd meeting occurs, because they don't have a regional manager, just an interim, which is Lisa Trottier right now. And it's gonna depend how that meeting goes. That was basically the response from the CEO. Councillor Thompson.
When is Falcon Brothers closing, what's the anticipated closure date?
I have no further information than that, which is someone from one of the directors just brought it up.
Has that been made public, or it is now, but is that actually public?
Is that a public meeting for BCBC? It's not a private meeting. All right, and that would be it. So we have a motion to receive. Councillor Ross, second by Councillor Tripp. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Okay, 8A. Subject matter appointments of the Chief Election Officer and Deputy Chief Election Officer from Corporate Services. The recommendation is that, just have a little change on this one, so I gotta get the paperwork. Apologies. Okay, the council appoints Don Atorp, I hope I'm saying it right, as the Chief Election Officer as contracted, and Daniel Drexler, Deputy Corporate Officer, as the Deputy Chief Election Officer at the rate of $1,200 for the City of Grand Forks, and further authorizes the Chief Election Officer to hire election officials for the purpose of conducting the 2018 local government election. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson. Second. Councillor Ross. Discussion. Okay. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. 8B, subject matter, temporary use permit for tourist commercial special event camping development from Development Engineering Services. Recommendation is that council direct staff to proceed with the statutory requirements for public notice of the decision at the April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting regarding the temporary use permit for tourist commercial / special event camping purposes on land zone small lot residential R2, legally described as Lot 1, District Lots 380 and 520. SDYD Plan KAP 64274. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Ross. Any discussion? Councillor Tripp.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. Yeah, I would be willing to vote for this if we added, this as statutory requirements, but I think we added some extra caveats this morning in terms of who would be canvassed. And just so long as that is included in there, I would be happy to support this.
Councillor Hammond.
Yeah, I know it's a temporary use permit, but it's a 3-year temporary use permit. I didn't know we did temporary use permits for that length of time, with the option to renew for an additional 3 years. I thought that the temporary use permit would be for each season. So like for this one weekend of events, we would have a temporary use permit in place so that it could be used for that purpose. If, say, the GFI came along and asked for permission, then they would apply for another temporary use permit and so on for other events. I didn't know that it would be a straight 3-year. And part 2 of my question is, if the residents are canvassed and there's negative feedback, what happens then? Because are we in a situation like we were with Boundary Women's Coalition, where we had all the petitions going around from Bryson Place and neighbors that didn't want it in their backyard? So what happens in that case, since it's private land?
So, Your Worship, I believe our senior planner has some answers to the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For you to council, so regarding the additional canvassing, first of all, the additional that we've put in our work plan is for hand delivery to the adjacent cul-de-sacs, plus posting on the notice boards of the multifamily, residential, and institutional uses to the north, as well as the 2 advertisements, of course, in the newspaper. That's statutory. We'll also be putting it on website and Facebook. So going above and beyond and getting out there. Now, if going to the last question, if there is a lot of questions from the public, we could choose to recommend to council to defer the decision for further study if there's something that needs to be done to, to ensure that the concerns are met, if there are significant concerns. Likewise, if there's significant support, maybe certain things can be adjusted as well to enable the uses as intended. And it's different from a special event type permit in that because it relates to a use of land that's not in the zoning bylaw for that zone, it's a 3-year term as determined in the Local Government Act, and then it's renewable for 3 years, after which time proponents would need to apply to council again. So it's not treated quite as strongly as a rezoning, but it's given the notice requirements of rezoning because it's a change in land use for a period of time from what's allowed in the zoning.
And the
bylaw.
charter allows for 3 years.
The Local Government Act, it specifies 3 years renewable ones. Yeah.
So why would the proponent not come forward and request on a yearly basis?
That's thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there is an investment in infrastructure on the site, and if they see that let's say Canifest is going for another few years and so on, they'd want to see that kind of investment in place. There's a fair amount of work in making this site happen, and if they want to turn around and develop it into something else, would probably have different requirements for water services and sewer and that, and they're installing.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff. The Canifest used Department Park previously for overflow camping. Have there been any concerns expressed from the residential neighborhood in that area about noise and the like? Or have they been reasonably well behaved?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the complaints that we've received at Public Works have, I bet you there's only been a couple of isolated things with dust and things like that were taken care of, but overall, I think people were pretty well behaved or respectful.
Councillor Hammond, Councillor Tripp, Councillor Butler.
So, in hindsight, looking at this, it might actually work out really well for the community, because if he's putting a pavilion in there, he's putting lighting in there, and we don't have any community space for events, like weddings, or even the GFL fair, or banquets, or get-togethers, or, you know, we don't have a community center. You know, perhaps there's options for the community to rent back, or for special interest groups to rent it back from Chuck for those events, so that it can be used for community space. Because it sounds like the water's gonna be in place, the lighting is gonna be in place, the pavilion will be there. So, I think that would be.
So if, Mike, sorry to interrupt, but a quick question based on what you just said. If there's a pavilion being put there, is the actual event going to be held there?
No.
No, so, okay.
It's gonna be a cover for
It's
camping.
just for camping.
Yeah.
Councillor Tripp, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. My understanding about that pavilion was it was just for basic services there, it might be garbage or I don't know what, but the question that I was wondering about was, last year, when the campers were on Dick Bartlett Park, that was one number, but now if they're also going to be using Dick Bartlett Park as well as this new area, I just wonder how many more units, whatever you want to call them, campers, rigs, or whatever coming in, will be used, and also how will that affect our sandy dump facilities? And would we potentially be needing to look at putting in a second one or anything like that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the weekend does put pressure on the system, so we do some maintenance beforehand to try to alleviate any issues that may arise from that. We do keep a close eye on it because there is a lot of toilet chemicals and that get flushed down. But it hasn't been an issue so far. I would expect the lineups to be very, very lengthy, and maybe a lot of the people going to other places on their way home to that.
That was my question.
All right, any more discussion or call the question on this? Yeah, okay. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. 8C, Visa credit card application is a subject matter from our Chief Financial Officer. The recommendation is that Council approves the application for Calabria Visa credit cards through the Grand Forks Credit Union with an aggregate credit limit of $100,000, and further to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to assign administrators on this account. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Hammond. Discussion. Councillor Hammond, Councillor Butler.
Yeah, there's, we already have a policy in place and limits as to how much each department can spend without approval coming to council, right?
From the purchasing policy.
From the purchasing policy. So even though you would have a credit card that's got a $100,000 limit on it, whoever you administer that or give to administer on that account would still have to follow the purchasing policy regulations?
Your worship, it's not a $100,000 credit card, nobody gets that.
That's limit of $100,000.
So I believe the aggregate, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, but each person gets allotted a certain amount, like I think the most is like a $10,000 limit on some of the higher ones. For people.
Oh, a combined credit limit of
Yes.
$100,000.
Yes.
Okay.
Councillor Butler.
Yeah, thanks for clearing that up. I'm just wondering, because this actually came up at UBCM, one of the other councils was talking about getting spending under control, and this was one of the things that they looked at. So I'm just wondering, how many credit cards are out there, and who holds credit cards with the city?
Chief Financial Officer, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it's primarily
managers and deputy managers who hold the credit cards. And just for clarification, yeah, the max limit, with the exception of the chief administrator officer, is 10,000. So there's 8 at 10,000 and 1 at 20,000, just within our registered policy.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Through you to our manager, this just replaces what already exists, it's just a different card. Basically, is,
MasterCard.
yeah, so is that correct?
Mr. Mayor? Yes, that's correct. And once we get the new Visa cards, we'll have all the MasterCards will be canceled.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. All right, moving on to information items. Subject matter, officer's expense allowance from the chief financial officer. Recommendation is the council receives for information the memo from the chief financial officer regarding the Canada Revenue Agency change to tax status of municipal officers' allowances. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ross. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Bylaws. 11A. Elections Bylaws 2042 and 2043 from Corporate Services. Recommendation that council gives final reading of the General Local Government Election Bylaw number 2042-2018. Also, can we do this separate? Yeah, we'll do this separate. Mover, please. Councillor Tripp, Councillor Butler. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. Second recommendation is that council gives final reading of the Automated Voting Machines Authorization Bylaw number 2043, 2018. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Ross. Discussion. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? So carried. 11B. 5-year financial plan bylaw 2045, again from our chief financial officer. The recommendation is that council gives final reading to the 5-year financial plan bylaw 2018-2022, number 2045. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Thompson. Seconder, Councillor Ross. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Councillor Butler and Councillor Tripp are opposed.
I thought you approved the 3%.
Okay, moving on to
Yeah, at the previous meeting.
No.
motion carried. 11C, subject matter, campground fees and charges update bylaw 1958-A4. Recommendation from Corporate Services. Recommendation is that council gives the first 3 readings to the City of Grand Forks fees and charges amendment bylaw number 1958-A4 2018 and direct staff to present the bylaw for final reading at the April 23rd, 2018 regular meeting. Mover, please. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Ross. All those in discussion. Councillor Tripp.
So, thank you, Mayor Conrad, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is the one that would deal with events on city property, and that you're recommending the 5% there. Is that, just trying to buzz through it here to see if I can find it, that fee. Yeah, page 77 there. Oh, is that a different? No, that's right, sorry, it's page 78, where we're looking at this new area, I guess that's 5% of the gross daily revenue up to $2,000 per day. I went online and was looking at the Kelowna one, just for comparison's sake, and they have 2 categories. They have a nonprofit rate and a commercial rate, and you know, I was certainly interested in the commercial rate, not so much the nonprofit. They're actually asking for 8% of gross ticketed sales up to a maximum of $8,000, which I thought was interesting. But my concern, and I wanted maybe to have a little bit of discussion around that, what we feel is reasonable. But my concern too would be for the small vendors or people using public property that really aren't making much, maybe a couple $100 or something like that. And I just didn't know if it would be appropriate to be charging them, or if maybe that percentage could go down a bit. So those are just some thoughts I wanted to bring up to council for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so Mr. Gates actually worked on this bylaw for us. His main concern was the campground one, to get that one in. And as council was discussing the last couple times regarding this 5% fee, it's really meant to deal with things like CanFest, right? So like the bigger events where we could actually have a separate contract in place. It's more about having the language in place that a separate fees and charges agreement may be. It's just the exact same schedule as he presented, I think, last time. As there was a little bit of a rush, he kind of put them together as it was before. So that was the suggestion about a year ago when we went through this. And yeah, so it's up to council ultimately to choose what you would like to do. We're just hoping to have this one line item in there primarily so we can work with proper agreements based on the main venues that are main events that come.
Okay, and I think I might just follow up on that. So then how would this being in place assist at this point? Would it be just exactly as it's specified there, 5% for any ticketed event up to $2,000 a day? So if the event is a 3-day event, it would just be $6,000. That would be it, or?
That I'm not aware of. Mr. Gates has taken over most of the event-related items, and so he's also the one looking after the campground now, and that's where this came on. I would say for an event like CanFest, simply having an agreement that we could make that gives us the authority to do such an agreement because of that fees and charges schedule would be more beneficial than anything at that point.
So does
But
that...
I can't speak for Mr. Gates. Maybe Mr. Reed has a little more information, but I'm not sure in how much these guys were in and out of the office last week, so.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the idea was just that if there's a business or a company that is making money on city property, that they would pay a reasonable portion back to the city for using their property. So they get away from the rental fees and the business license or whatever that they don't have to purchase to do this setup, I guess, on city property, that the city would not be out the whole sum, because there is some administration to a lot of these things.
For sure. Yeah, no, and I'm really pleased to see it. I'm glad it's here. I'm just wondering about the teeth to this, and is that the right amount, or are we looking at that just at this point being sort of like a straw man, and it can be negotiated with each individual group or event?
I think it was a starting place with not going after the nonprofit or that, but if it's a business or a group that is getting financial gain for this, then we would want to recoup some.
Councillor Hammond?
Yeah, you clarified one point on it, that it's not nonprofit, so the fall fair won't be impacted, GFI won't be impacted. But if it is a business venture, I think 5% is fair, because even if it's a small business and they make $200, it's only $10. So, it's not gonna break them. We're not Kelowna, I don't think we need to raise it. What we wanna do is try to attract business. And, and with them come people that they bring as well. So I think that's a good starting point.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff. What I thought I heard was that it will be for the larger events that will fall under this temporary commercial use of public property, not necessarily the small events that are for nonprofits. So you would negotiate a contract with the larger organizations? Did I hear that correctly?
As Daniel mentioned, Mr. Gates is working on the details of this, but this was basically for even possibly the farmer's market, because they use city land and the power set up there and that to sell instead of a storefront or whatever. So there's some gain there that, you know, he would be looking at different things like that, but not the small, say, for instance, the fall fair or society that's just trying to put something on and survive year to year.
Follow-up?
Yeah, one. Because Kevin isn't at our meeting tonight, and we have a number of questions that I'm hearing that he would be the better person to ask and to answer. I would suggest, and I would make a tabling motion, that we refer this issue, to the April 23rd meeting.
Well, it is going to be for final reading.
Oh, the final reading.
That's the nature of the resolution.
Oh,
The importance, Mr. Mayor, is the first schedule.
Yeah.
The second schedule, if we want, we could bring it as another bylaw at a later time.
Yeah.
While we're amending the fees and charges, Mr. Gates must have thought in discussion with us, it could be a simple add-on as it was being discussed with council as well, but the important one is the campground one. That's crucial. That's why the short timeline, that's why there was no discussion at a committee of the whole level. It was more like, we gotta get this through without introducing it properly.
I withdraw my motion.
Councilor Weatherly?
Did you want to add something to that, Jen?
Sorry.
I was gonna say, Your Worship, another option that council could choose to do instead of offering first 3 readings is to do first 2 readings, in which that if there was any changes, we could still provide changes before the 3rd reading was given, so that's another option that council could do as well.
Councilor Hammond?
So I have a question.
Sorry, I was still in line.
Yeah,
I was-
okay,
oh,
okay.
I was just trying to be patient and
Okay.
accommodating.
Go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, I'm just curious, is Canada still operating under the BC Pain Society, which is a nonprofit? So would that,
Would you like to weigh in on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know Kevin has looked into that in great depth, and I think he feels confident with how he would handle it, so.
Councilor Hammond?
Well, I know Kevin's not here, but I do have a question before it comes to 3rd reading that perhaps somebody can relate to Kevin. So that they have this information. So if we have, say, the fall fair, and they bring in outside food vendors, or outside vendors, and they pay a percentage to the fall fair to be there, they pay a fee to be there. Is the city going to request that a portion, 5% of their daily fee, even though the fall fair doesn't have to contribute funding to the city, but any commercial vendors that are invited to participate, like all the food trucks, would they be required to contribute 5% to the city?
That would be a definite Kevin question.
Yes.
So then I
He-
guess
he is working on
the recommendation then would be to only give it 2 readings.
yeah, I'll put forward that amendment to only give it 2 readings and.
But is that going to be enough time for, is that going to wreck things?
We give the final 2 readings on the 23rd
You can't do the last 2 readings
together?
No.
together, no. So the issue is more to have before May 1st, the campground part amended.
Oh, okay.
We could drop the schedule, the last schedule, right?
Off it.
Off it,
Yeah.
yeah. And for now, and then bring that back in May, maybe for a committee of the whole discussion, a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, yeah.
Councilor Tripp?
Yeah, just if I can just comment on that. I'm really happy to see it on there, and I really would like it to move forward, but I do think maybe we have a few too many questions
Needs a bit of
to
work.
just do that tonight, yeah.
Okay,
But
so-
without that schedule, we can give it 3 readings.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I make a motion that we drop that second schedule for the business fees and charges, Schedule
Schedule
I.
I.
Just say we're just schedule campground fees and charges.
Campground fees and charges.
you made the motion.
Well,
Okay, so I'll make the motion that we're only gonna vote on Schedule F, campground fees and charges. And that we bring back Schedule I to the next meeting of the whole for discussion.
so is that your amendment?
I'll second.
Okay.
So you're dropping the one schedule from the
Schedule I.
bylaw.
Which is business fees and charges.
Okay, and with that being dropped, then we would give 3 bylaws, or
Three
3
readings.
readings to the
Schedule
bylaw.
F.
Yeah, the bylaw as presented, because it's the bylaw, not just the schedule that
Yeah.
we're reading.
That's right.
Okay. So all those in favor of the amendment? Okay. All those in favor of the amended resolution as it was presented?
Which would be that resolution, yes.
Exactly with the amendment. So carried. Okay. Alrighty, down to item 12, late items. And as discussed earlier, it's the downtown business community request to change power outage time from corporate services and outside works. The recommendation is that council discusses the request received from the downtown business community to change the power outage time. Move it, please. Councillor Butler, Councillor Hammond. Discussion. Here we go. Councillor Tripp, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mayor Conrad. I would like to recommend that council direct staff to change the outage start time to 1 p.m. and that council approves an $8,000 increase in the budget to handle that change.
Oh, so you're amending the motion to add that?
It doesn't have a
Prior to
time.
making a motion, I think we could have a discussion, because there's an option for a 4 o'clock time,
Yeah.
which would give businesses a lot more
Yeah.
leeway and latitude, considering I know the cost is another 7,000 more, but if we're gonna spend it, then how many are we gonna appease by closing it at 1?
Well, it's a compromise. I think compromises are good. The other businesses had to, suck it up for the whole day. This way, I think it's a good compromise. They've still got till 1.
Yeah, but people are still eating lunch until 3. That's doesn't help the restaurants.
Councillor Hammond?
How many residential units will be impacted by this?
That's the other thing.
Mr. Reed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I don't have the exact number. It's, there's some big condo blocks or apartment blocks.
Like
involved in
imagine
it.
this one right here behind Home Harbor.
Right. There's gonna be some in Rockwell, because that's a feeder, so we have to shut that off and do some work there, but
Condos on Riverside.
yes. that
Yeah, it
was
says
part
here,
of it.
2 condo buildings. A quick question I have, so if the outage starts at 4 p.m.,
8 hours.
it's 8 hours?
It's starting to line up more
So
than
go to midnight. Go ahead, Mr. Reed.
As I mentioned this morning, the contractor has just mobilized into Grand Forks, so I haven't had a chance to meet with them yet.
Okay.
So we have a meeting tomorrow morning, so if council wishes that this time get pushed back, I would hope that they would give some latitude and just say, try to schedule it at 1 o'clock or maybe possibly later if you can, but I haven't had a direct conversation with the contractor yet.
So they have no awareness that we're potentially asking them to push it back?
We did ask them for pricing and some options there.
Right.
So they're aware that we're looking at it, but we did tell them that, preference would be, if it did have to get moved, would be to 1 o'clock.
I'm just looking at why the stringent timeline is 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock. I mean, why wouldn't they be able to do it, let's say, at 3 o'clock or 2:30, somewhere around there, which is, Joyce,
I think, your worship, you just put a time down so it gives the businesses a time where they can be prepared to close. If we have a 1 o'clock time and they know that they should be closing down, however, the group may not be able to get in there till closer to 2, so it's not going to be like you're shutting down, these guys are standing in suspended animation, so to speak, and so I think we wanted to be able to give them a solid time so they know that we're just not gonna shut the switch off when they're right in the middle of some transactions.
So what was their proposed timelines if they're coming in, if they were coming in today, were they proposing to start first thing tomorrow morning?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they are starting work tomorrow, but
Okay.
there's prep work to be done.
Okay,
So they are here for the 5 days working. But the outage was scheduled for Thursday, so at 8 AM.
okay, so they could possibly, it might work out that their timelines might facilitate the fact that they might not even be able to start first thing, so it might only be a 12, 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock start anyway. I'm just looking at the, you know, the high increase in cost of extra charges, whereas they could possibly do other work which won't slow down the whole process and still be able to do, let's say, a 2 o'clock shutdown or 2:30 or 3 with not as a significant cost, if you know where I'm going with this.
I was next on the.
This scheduled outage is for the reconductoring part, so it's a section of work that the two crews are gonna have to have accomplished by the 80 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot of time to do extra additional work. It's gonna depend on the weather and.
Yeah, the lead up time to the actual shutdown is what I'm talking about. The lead up time to that shutdown.
Right. With the contract, they can only work certain number of hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're overtime, so.
Okay,
we're-
okay.
We do have, like I say, some other work going on that day scheduled, so with electricians and that, so there's a lot to change.
Okay, so now we
After
have
Councillor.
Councillor, the next Councillor Butler, and then Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Ross. Okay. And
Yeah,
then
originally I was leaning towards the 4 o'clock time as well to give businesses as much opportunity as possible, but then with the 8 hours, if you're going to midnight, it's still cold out. You're gonna leave residences without heat, and then you're gonna have the same problem, but the people are gonna be in here upset that they had no heat, so it's, I think the 1 o'clock time, at least the heat will be back on by 9 o'clock, people can sleep in their houses, they might not be able to make dinner, but I'm just wondering, this says it's coming from the downtown business community, and through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hammett, did the DBA discuss this at all? And I'm just wondering why it's coming from an ad hoc group and not from the DBA?
Well, I don't think that's the name of the group, the downtown business community. It's coming from the business community. So Kathy Bovino was here representing portions of the business community, not the Downtown Business Association as such, but all the members that are affected by this outage.
Councillor Thompson and Councillor Ross.
If we have to change it, and I'm hearing that we're leaning that way, I would support the 1 o'clock. Because from what I'm hearing, and having a husband that's an industrial electrician, when you're working with that kind of wires and voltages and all those good things, that you want to be able to do it in daylight and to be assured. And we have to make assured that our contractors are safe. And, you know, it's 8:45 now, it's not that dark. So hopefully they would be in a good position to be able to complete that within those 8 hours. So, if you're looking for a resolution, to put forward, then I would recommend that.
That Councillor Tripp already made.
Oh, did you recommend that?
Yeah, that's what I was
There was
thinking.
no second
You
on
can
it.
second it, though.
I'll second her motion.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Ross?
Your
Councillor
microphone.
Thompson?
Oh, am I on? I'm sorry. I'm turned off.
Yeah, we heard this morning about working after hours, and it does happen quite often, and that they can get adequate lighting to make it safe, and I believe that Mr. Reed had said they can get lighting that makes it safe. And yes, so we heard that this morning, so, and we also have some, new businesses in town that rely on that lunchtime trade, and honestly, shutting down at 1 o'clock is not gonna be good enough for them. I would have suggested, and as was suggested this morning by one of the folks that came from Home Hardware, that we shut down at 3. It still gives them 5 hours of daylight, and then they can work under lights. I'm not gonna support this resolution. I think we should shut down at 3 o'clock.
Councillor Hamel?
Yeah, initially I was going to go for the later time, 3 or 4 would be ideal. But then I realized how many residents are impacted as well, and then they're getting into the nighttime and they have no power and no lights, and no heat and no ability to cook. So I just wanted to clarify how many food servers are going to be impacted, because we don't have any on 72nd. Is it just the south side of Market? Entire, all the way through? Or is it?
Yeah, it would be from 4th Street to Big
From
Trades
City
down.
Hall all the way down? Okay, so there's 3. There's 3 for Jackie's there. Forest Pole, there's Jackie's that closes at 3, and then there's Jovis. We impact Jovis more because they stay open.
So just those ones on that side of the road?
Just those ones on that side of the road, so there's 3.
And Yaki Jackie's closes down at 1 o'clock, I think, on Saturdays at anyway. So I mean, I know it's a different day, but they do have that schedule.
Well, I mean, even if if people know in advance and we've given them that extra time that it could be closing at 1 or 1:30, at least they can start prepping. They can have a notice on the door in the morning, let people know that they're open for breakfast, open for lunch from noon, but they will be closing at 1 because they still have to do the dishwashing, they have to do cleanup. At the same time, with that many residents being impacted, it's gonna be a hardship all around. It's a total inconvenience, however you look at it, and I think the only way to deal with it is a compromise.
I have a quick question. How is the weather going to impact this type of operation? For this, should be having very inclement weather, how's that going to impact?
Rain.
Yeah, I mean, they're calling for rain, so we'd like a little latitude, but I'm sure they'll do what they can. They're used to working outdoors in whatever temperatures and weather they need to.
Okay.
Mhm.
The reason I asked that, there's no concern that possibly we might plan this outage and then you say, well, we can't do it in this heavy rain.
Have those tarps that they put over.
Well, I just want to make sure because you're dealing with high voltage.
Yeah, I think if it was hot work, that would be a different story, but them having to shut the power off and do it differently,
Okay.
I don't foresee it being a problem, but like I said, I haven't met with the contractor until tomorrow morning, so
Okay.
I'll be definitely getting their view on the
Okay. Just want to make sure we cross all our T's and dot all our I's after this long session of discussion. All right, so we've got a motion on the table
I would vote.
and a seconder,
I would vote
so
for.
we're going to call it, pardon?
I would vote for.
I'm going to call the
for that.
question. So all those in favor of
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock?
One.
If, yes, providing that it's explained to them that, like, it doesn't have to start right at 1 o'clock on the dot. If they can stretch it a little bit further, another half an hour, that would be wonderful. But to wait until 4 o'clock, I think would be too late because it really puts an inconvenience on people that want to get to bed or go for dinner or.
Close the question.
Yeah. So all those in favor of the call? Anyone opposed? So carried. Now, our notice of motion for late items 12B and C.
Just a point of order there. I put forward the main motion and then I think Councillor Tripp added on that amendment, so
Oh, so we have to go back to the main motion then,
I think so. I can just check with the recorder there.
Discuss the request.
The initial motion was simply to,
Discuss.
Yeah.
to discuss. We didn't have a,
Yeah, there's no real resolution required for the discussion end of it. We could vote on it. We had our discussion, so all those in favor of the discussion? Anyone opposed? So carried. But the seriousness of the resolution was the timelines,
Yeah.
which evolved out of that discussion, so. All right, 12B. Notice of motion for in support of 167.
Would you like me to read motion 167? Okay. So motion 167, that the Standing Committee on Public Safety and National Security be instructed to undertake a study on rural crime in Canada and consider factors, including but not limited to, 1, current rural crime rates and trends, 2, existing RCMP and other policing resources and policies in rural, remote, and indigenous communities, particularly in relation to population density, policing geographic areas, and staff shortages. 3, current partnerships with provincial and municipal police, and 4, possible recommendations to improve rural crime prevention and to curb emerging crime rates, and that the committee report its findings to the House within 6 months of the adoption of this motion. So this is going forward to the federal government, and what they're asking for is a letter of support with a simple 1 or 2 line statement, and there's an example here. Rural crime has become an increasing issue in BC, much like most of Canada. As a municipality, we are doing our best to support our community and our neighbors, but there are limits to our resources and authority. We appreciate these concerns being addressed and would like to extend support to motion 167, and then we can insert a quote from our area.
We really need a notice of motion on that. I mean, we
No.
could just make the motion
The
because we're
motion's
just
already made, all we
supporting.
do-
Yeah, we're just
Yeah,
in
it's just
support.
Yeah.
It's just like a letter of support,
Yeah.
which like similar, which would come off my
Yeah.
office or,
I can make a motion or that we write a letter of support
Yeah.
of,
I would like to make the motion that we write a letter of support
Yep.
to this Shannon Stubbs in support of motion 167.
okay, seconder please. Councillor Ross, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. 12C, DBA subject matter.
Okay, and I would like to put forward a notice of motion. Whereas the Grand Forks Downtown Business Association is concerned about excessive speeds and safety in the downtown core, citing several accidents and near-miss accidents on downtown roads. Therefore be it resolved that the City of Grand Forks install 4-way stop signs at 72nd Avenue and 2nd Street and Market Avenue and 2nd Street. And further resolved to reduce the speed limit to 30 kilometers per hour within the boundaries of 72nd Avenue on the south to 75th Avenue to the north, 6th Street from the west to Riverside Drive on the east, excluding Central Avenue.
It's your notice of motion. To be,
6 would be from Subway, so,
Okay.
yeah, and where the Legion is.
Yeah.
Riverside.
And down Riverside?
And over to Riverside,
But not
but
down?
not Central, yeah, no, not down the residential area,
so there was a motion to be presented at the 23rd.
Yeah.
23rd meeting.
yeah.
Seconder please.
Not seconding it, no, but I'd like to ask.
Seconder.
Well, she's just giving notice.
She's just
of
giving
motion.
notice of motion.
Yeah.
So there's no, we can discuss it on the 23rd.
Well, that's why I wanted to ask this question.
Oh,
Well, I'll second it then. so
You
then
don't
we
need
can-
a second,
No.
but anyway. I was just hoping that staff might be able, as if we're bringing forward this motion to the meeting, it'd be nice to have any background information that's relevant if staff could provide that, because it'll be on the agenda as an agenda item. So it should include all relevant background information that the city has on this issue. Like, we held the open house for the public, and we got feedback on that issue. I don't know if staff's looked into it at all, consulted with RCMP, that type of.
Is that gonna allow for enough staff time?
Yeah,
We're all saying the same thing.
I can already see staff.
Deadline's 2 days away.
The deadline is 2 days away for the April 23rd meeting, so
Yeah.
it's highly unlikely to have
That's what
anything.
that was gonna be exactly my recommendation. Yeah, Councillor Hammond?
Mr. Mayor, can I just like to object that further study from staff, I don't believe is required. This is a safety issue concerning downtown. We'd like to make it more pedestrian friendly. And as a safety issue, if the RCMP or the province turned around and did a survey to poll people, how many people want seatbelts? And everybody said no, does that mean that rule doesn't come into play? I mean, this is a safety issue for down here, and I think that we just need to use our common sense and try to make this a more pedestrian-friendly area within our shopping core.
But it is a huge subject matter.
I don't
Huge.
think
But
it's that
it
big.
can be referred back to staff on.
I mean, it's not gonna
23rd, but
impact
people know
very
we're
many
working
drivers,
on it.
because for the most part, people driving around the downtown core are going slow anyway. Most of them are looking for parking spots. It's just the few that are blowing through off 70, on Second, coming over the bridge, that are just doing 60 and 70 Ks that are going through there. That's why we need the traffic calming with the 4-way stop and we reduce speed limit. Just as a reminder to people, if there's a notice there that says it's 30 kilometers an hour, it catches people's attention and they know to slow down. You know, hopefully they know to. And a stop sign will definitely help them, make them slow down. But I think it's just
speed limit signs, I don't know if that will have much effect, because who's gonna implement the,
Well, it still becomes
Regulating of it.
part of the RCMP, but I mean,
Yeah.
at least people are aware that there is a reduced.
We're debating.
Yeah, we're
I think
debating and
that's
deciding.
going to be brought forward on the 23rd, so with all due respect,
Okay. I'll show it.
I do.
all right, so,
Is there one to eat?
guess we'll go on duty.
No, yeah,
No.
Just
So
a
we're
heads
done?
up.
Good. All right. Close. Now we're going to questions from the public and the media. Again, same routine. Go ahead.
There we go.
No,
Yes, okay, thank you, Your Worship, Kate Zales for the Gazette. Just because it's a little unclear based on the memo here, for this power outage, it gives a dollar figure range, $8,000 to $15,000. So with the 1 p.m. outage, what budget amendment does that represent?
Manager of operations.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the initial budgeting that was done was from 1 o'clock, it would be the 8,000, whatever it was. From the 4 o'clock, it would be the 15,000. But I don't believe that that took into account some of the costs that would be associated with that.
Okay. So the baseline would be 8,000, but we could be looking at a little bit higher?
For sure, yeah.
Thank you.
Gentleman in the back.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Rod Zelinski. I've got one question and one comment, and it relates more to the committee of the whole, if I may. This morning in committee of the whole, you had a records retention bylaw on the list of things to talk about. And I was just wondering why council would allow that their personal emails get deleted after 30 days. So having gained your attention, without a list of what gets retained and gets deleted, anything can happen with giving a blank slate to administration. And as you look at your staff across the way, none of the staff were here 4 years ago. So I'm not necessarily concerned about how the records are done with this group of people, but it's the next group that comes along. Once you give a carte blanche to the corporate officer to delete and retain records at their whim, I don't think that's doing the public any good, especially when we know that contracts, consulting reports and whatnot should be held for many years.
Your CEO.
Your worship, corporate would not do things at a whim. We have certain rules and regulations that we have to follow by. There's certain things that you never ever have you automatically delete. When they're talking about emails that are deleted is a personal stuff like, hey, are you going for lunch at 1 o'clock, are you going at 2, you don't keep that stuff. When you have contracts and you have certain studies and everything, those remain within the corporation, and they just don't go flying out the window.
As soon as I recall, there was a list attached to that. which-
There's a list
At
of
the end
certain
of that
things that we're
documentation.
legislatively
Yeah.
required to do, and so it's one of those things that, it's not a person's whim that decides on, well, we don't need that anymore, so we're just gonna get rid of it now, like the letters patent or anything like that, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Councillor Butler?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I know our original bylaw that we removed today did have that list, like you said, of the years and when it would be, things would be deleted, but the new one doesn't. But we were told that underneath the legislation that's already in place with the province, that those statutes are already put in place. So that's why it didn't need to be on there, because it's already provincially mandated. But, honestly, I didn't go and read the provincial legislation, so I'm just trusting that that is there. Would have been nice to have had that included on the report, just to see what we are now following.
Your CEO.
So, Your Worship, besides the actual bylaw piece that's coming in, we're going to be having policy guidelines. So it's going to be guidelines for staff to follow in that aspect. So it's going to be basically the same lists, except it's not going to be part of the bylaw because those lists will change, just like everything else changes. And it's like the deputy corporate officer wants to weigh in on this a little
Yeah,
bit
so-
And
as
just,
well,
I'm giving everybody a little latitude here because it was not on tonight's agenda, this discussion, so.
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, thank you. At the end of the day, we're working on a new records management system. The new system is based on a folder structure that's approved by the LGMA, and we're gonna follow LGMA guidelines regarding the retention as per the individual folders where items are stored in. So miscellaneous items like Ms. Heinrich was saying regarding emails that are transitory in nature, hi, how are you, those kind of things, they can be deleted right now. Items that have to do with a contract that are a business decision, they would have to be then stored in the appropriate folder that then has a retention schedule of 7 years at the end of the contract assigned to it. So there is a lot of things happening in the background, and that's why it's almost impossible to maintain that kind of Excel sheet in a bylaw at the end of the day, because it's not anymore just those 30 items you've seen in the old bylaw that were attached. It is hundreds of items, and they will change as legislation changes.
Right, so there are legislative guidelines and safety factors penciled in, obviously.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, there is going to be a list, then, is that what I heard? Or some of these things like consultant reports, engineering reports, are going to be kept for how long?
Within the guidelines of the act.
That's what we're working through right now with this.
But those aren't covered in
overall
the act,
records management system. So there is, we have a consultant hired right now that's helping us out on that avenue. And she's an expert on records management and retention with a master's in archival studies. At the end of the day, I have to follow the advice that I'm getting from an expert on the field.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess my comment then, Mr. Mayor, was I'm surprised that council time and staff time has been taken over by this power outage that's planned. If you remember back a few weeks ago, council did approve a electrical safety policy and procedures document. And if anyone read that, you would see that this conductor that they're working with cannot be done hot, and it does give the electrical department their oversight over taking power outages at any time for any length. So it's an operational policy, and from what I understand, you don't want to deal with those. So I'm surprised that so much time was taken over. Thank you.
Gentleman in the back?
Going back to your report from the regional district about
Identification, please.
Les Johnson, GFTV, you were saying that the Midway Mill is going to be closing. When is that happening? Do you know?
This was a very brief conversation that came up by one of the directors, and it was like kind of, well, did you know? And that's as far as it went. There was no real long discussion on it.
So when you say one of the directors, you mean one of the regional district directors? Okay. So there's no official notice from Logan Brothers? Okay, thank you.
Not that I'm aware of, not that anybody was aware of, but everybody was taken by the same surprise as myself.
Okay.
Any other questions? Councilor Butler?
I'm just wondering, did you double check with the mill to make sure they are closing?
No.
I don't know if we want to put that in our paper, just in case. Right, check numbers.
I think I have to call them.
That'd be
before I
great.
go
I'm
on.
only reporting back what I heard at the
I'm sure
meeting.
Vicky G knows what's
So,
going on.
yeah. And Marguerite too, yeah. So it's, that's all I can say. I'll shoot the messenger.
It'd be better than having the mill closing. It would be good if you were in the district. I just have a question.
Go ahead, Councilor Ross.
Just, you can help me out here, I'm sort of being a bit of a devil's advocate, but, you know, I always believed that it was our job as council to create policy that operationalized our OCP. And we stay out of the way, then we get out of the way because we have competent staff, including, you know, all the guys that work in public works. And the only time we really intervene is when we're hearing back from the public on proposed projects that are happening and when they feel that they're being negatively impacted. So it's not that we're sleeping at the switch. It's that, you know, the job has to be done, and some of the people in the business community were just saying, hey, wait a minute. And so, you know, then we revisit it and say, okay, if we can do that to minimize that impact because people are legitimately concerned about it, is, you know, is when we have this discussion about how we can work with our contractors and our staff to reduce the impact on the community. So, I mean, that's the way I looked at it, including with this issue around the electrical. We knew it was going to be an issue shutting down, and the community was given notice, and there was enough of them that said, wait a minute, for us to have another look at it and see if we can come to some kind of compromise. And I bet you anything that not everybody's going to be happy with that compromise either. So, you know, it's just one of those difficult situations. And
Well, fortunately, we were able to come up with a form of a collaborative effort to help the business community. Had it been, for instance, example, Fortis or another larger corporation, probably they would not have gone down that avenue for sure. They probably would have just shut the power off and that's it, and it's to be
But
done.
I think it's important to note that our management came with a report
Mhm.
before council with some options to consider. So, well, as a normal practice, council doesn't get involved in the policy where there are decisions that could impact negatively a section of the community, and our management says to council, the policy says we can just go ahead and do this, but we're getting feedback, and can you help us make the right decision? Because we're gonna have to fund that. Out of
Yeah, it's gonna
taxation.
cost us money.
So, I think that's, staff to be commended for doing that.
Yeah, and he's very proactive. Gentlemen again?
Yeah, Rod Zelinski again. Just a comment, Councillor Thompson. Seeing as that the city does funnel for $500,000 off electrical rates to put in general revenue, I don't think the dollar amount should be an issue to accommodate the people. You're right. So, so I would think it's Saturday or Sunday would probably fit more people's schedules.
Okay, are there any other questions or concerns? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn? Councillor Hammond, Councillor Butler, all those in favor?